Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Our guest today is Dalton Henshaw, the innovative founder of Bullfrog Agency in Melbourne, Victoria. Starting his career at just 18 with a men's lifestyle publication, Dalton has spent the last 5 years making significant strides in the advertising industry, collaborating with both global and national brands. His expertise in storytelling and business development, along with his forward-thinking approach to digital media, offers a fresh perspective on the world of advertising and production. In this episode, Dalton shares his thoughts on the essential role of production in the creative process. He highlights the importance of involving production teams early, the key traits of an exceptional producer, and the changing relationship between account service and production. Dalton's hiring philosophy focuses on a can-do attitude and the benefits of side hustles, which reflect a proactive and inventive spirit. We also explore Dalton's thoughts on the role of technology in production and the cultural transformation required towards greater industry collaboration. Dalton Henshaw. Dalton Henshaw, thanks for jumping on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with us.
Thank you, Brenton, for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, as always, probably best thing is to kick off with who you are and your journey into advertising, but then also, starting Bullfrog.
I'll give you the elevator background of what has been 12 years of being self-employed, or I guess a founder of a few different businesses. One being publishing, which started my journey at the age of 18, and founded a men's lifestyle publication back in the day where it was blogs, not even the world of social media per se. And that opened up doors and opportunities globally, and that was equally a very great became a hobby and a passion project into a fully fledged career, on top of managing to try chase one dream of chasing after my AFL dream for a little bit growing up. But nonetheless, that sort of segued into finding my passion to where I am now, and equally working closely with my beautiful wife, Laura Henshaw, on her business, as much as being a Bullfrog partner in what used to be called Keep It Cleaner, now Kick, which is one of the largest health and wellness technology companies in the world. So that in itself, and the lived experience over 12 years, and largely only been self-employed or a founder, and now I've just turned 31, so 13 years per se, has been an incredible journey of shared learnings and opportunities, but equally one that is deeply rooted in business building and storytelling, which often I characterize myself as someone that is motivated and going to be keeping to do those things for the rest of my life. So how did I get into advertising? Well, the segue from, publishing or storytelling to specific audiences or customers to drive, value and also support in the typical sort of publication way, naturally opened up conversations of being an early adopter of being able to connect the power of digital to equally fuse that world into the world that we know it so well now, and so many different verticals, from the old print days to where we are now as far as digital publishing goes. That took me around the world working with global brands, national brands, and equally still, by being that early adopter, I started to find this true love of not only sharing that knowledge, but strategically looking at how businesses, brands, companies go to market and communicate more effectively. That was once digital space, and Bullfrog was the coming together of being asked to do more or help on more things with different perspectives, insights, knowledge, strategy, for some of the, most incredible brands that still blow me away to get us started. And that first company that equally was a big tipping point of me having this sort of segue in my career, or my choice and journey of going to wind down something that had afforded me so many incredible opportunities, but I probably wasn't as passionate about that space anymore, because naturally I was finding a fusion between consulting for brands, but then also being their advertiser. And I really naturally started to lean into the fact that I love the ability of looking at the connected pathways and experience of how brands and businesses go to market. How do you drive that commercial outcome, but also how do you do it in a really effective, beautiful way of pushing the boundaries of what creativity looks like back to business. And so starting Bullfrog, I'm forever indebted by our still foundation client, AIA Insurance, and still with us here 4 years later, which I'm super proud of. But Damien Mew, the CEO, pretty much, put a lot of expectation, but also clear expectation and opportunity of the vision that he was building for the company, but also personally, as much as this team and backing this team to deliver that, has been a huge enabler of the growth that Bullfrog's been able to take in a short period of time, of someone that inherently did not grow up or be for most of their career an advertising executive, or come from network agencies like you see so many independent agencies popping up today. So I'm very humbled and grateful for what this team has been over the last 4 years. But that journey has come back to very much building an incredible team around me, and I wouldn't be here without them. So it's nice to be having this conversation. It's always nice to be asked. But very much I wouldn't be here if it wasn't the brilliant people that have been on this journey, not just in past, but definitely, of course, present.
So picking up from what you've just mentioned about the people that you work with, let's talk about certain people within the agency, and particular with this podcast, production people. So through your journey, talk to me about production side, production companies, internal production teams. Have you had that? Have you had that of part of all your businesses over the journey of the last 13 years?
Yep. The fast answer is yes. Like, inherently in the publishing space, we were getting asked, and what you see a lot of publishers now is to be able to vertically integrate the work they do, how they speak, and more than just words, and create content seamlessly across multiple platforms and channels. That was inherently linked in what was my journey in men's lifestyle publishing, but also an appreciation of the craft of being able to execute something from every step of the process. And when I talk about delivering end-to-end value for partners, clients, and people, obviously the partners you pick, which we work with many from a production company perspective, but the appreciation of the craft internally at Bullfrog has been inherently, not only just in my own lived experience and what I value, but inherently from our first hire, which you'll bloody love this, but Chris King, my first employee, was applied as a copywriter, but he could not spell, let's be really truthful. And naturally found himself in one of my big learnings in business, especially starting out with a lot of naivety but fast growth based on the support of good foundation partners, opportunity in that segue I mentioned earlier. Chris is a brilliant generalist, but he's a brilliant producer. He came out of film and arts and has a passion and deep passion, but he's a highly organised person, very charismatic, and a lot of companies and partners we work with know of him. But at the point I appointed him as a senior producer, knowing that a senior producer in advertising needed a lot more experience than old Chris King had at the ripe old age now of, what would he have been, like at 22, 23. But I think part fueling that naivety, but also that right attitude and energy, he's still in this business today and a huge part of the production department in lieu of our EP, Mark Taylor. And, through valuing the ability of producers to be almost like just the calm of chaos at the best of times is such an art in itself, but also some of the work that we've done be the world's first mohair suit, which is gross to still think about today, but the impact of that for Movember and equally our partner at the time, Politics, was unprecedented as far as not only the awareness and conversation it generated, but realising the way that production for me, as much as we believe in this team, has many forms, and the creative product is not just a conventional ad slot like so many businesses do look at it today, and if anything, the world is changing rapidly away from that. And so I think revaluing what production is a big part of our internal conversation right now, and not revaluing context of walking away from the beauty of what is delivering a beautiful TV product, but pushing the boundaries of what a creative product looks like and the role that production brings that to communicate effectively to customers or on behalf of brands in a really powerful way. And so coming back to that point of, it has been an intrinsic part of Bullfrog's growth journey and an appreciation of the craft. But I think now we're in this point, and you're seeing it across so many industries, but also the reframing of where people are consuming different experiences. The role of the producer can be so, not siloed, but it has so many facets that makes you appreciate the job that it does. But now the role has especially been, a creative business at that, the role that production has is very much looking at how do you deliver a creative product that people don't expect. And that's what we're challenging consistently.
Let's get into producers in particular, and what qualities do you believe make a standout producer, particularly in today's industry, considering that it is becoming so wide and varied. What do you think are the top qualities?
I think definitely being calm under pressure. Like, it's a high pressure environment and job. and equally being responsible for the product from end to end when it's at that point of execution of an idea. I think the opportunity often, and one thing I always talk about is producers at the start of the process is just as valuable at the end. And I think often sometimes they get connected with an idea, post the idea being formed, without input a bit more upstream in the process. And that's one big thing we look at from a process perspective in general. But I think if I'm looking at the core traits of a producer is being able to, they are the masters of keeping chaos and all bits and pieces spinning and all plates moving at the one time. I think being calm is definitely one thing. Being able to think fast on your feet and think laterally of how you problem solve. I think they're brilliant problem solvers, especially when it comes to coordinating some of our, what can be 150 people on the set. A recent campaign we did at the start of the year, we had 150 cast on top of 72 production team members. So being able to coordinate that is a huge, not only logistical piece, but also equally making sure everyone's delivering the roles they're there to do and the functions to play on the day is no mean feat. And if anything, the more experience you get in life, but also in your career, you can handle certain things in different ways, but it's not for everyone. So I think if you can be calm under pressure, but you're great at fixing or solving problems just as fast, it's a wonderful career to be in.
You were mentioning the creative process. I think in there we touched on getting them in as early as possible. Let's talk about the creative process, particularly in a Bullfrog, and how production integrates into the stages, considering, say, strategy and concept development. Now, not so much strategy, obviously, I don't know, but where do they slot in for you and where do you like them to jump in during that whole process?
At Bullfrog, we have always, and I guess it comes a little bit from not only someone that came into the industry with a bit of fresh eyes around how you deliver solutions to problems or opportunities with your partners, friends, colleagues, whatever it might be. And I think the biggest thing that we've always challenged is perspective at the start of the process of all people is very valuable. And I also think often it's siloed and removed, as I mentioned before. So to be honest, like how we incorporate, depending on the opportunity at hand or the problem we're trying to solve, we look at the one thing I'm most proud of this team, and it's very much intrinsically linked to the culture, is seeing the whole person, not just the skill set. And why that matters is because there's more than meets the eye of just someone's capability or skills that they have grown over a period of their career. They've also lived a life that has different shared experiences that can be at the value of the start of the process. So very much so, our creative process is not looking at just the waterfall effect of how you deliver a solution to a problem and then pull in those capabilities when they're needed, is pretty much where it makes sense depending on that opportunity and problem. Production is heavily involved pretty much from the get-go, which is, from what I know and what I can understand of the industry and the category is not necessarily common. So, and that allows you to get to certain ideas, be like a mohair suit or be able to execute things very early beyond just collaboration or communication across teams, which of course is a no-brainer and a given. But often it's not a given in a lot of companies because it's just assumed that they'll get it at one point in the process. But for us, I think it's always been a big part is perspective is important to shaping world-class ideas or world-class creative products. So if anything, the answer to the question is our process is very much about individuals being able to solve that problem and who is best placed, but also add value from their life's perspective upstream more so at the start of the process or when we're trying to solve the problem, and then work out how we map it back in to make sure we're being efficient and using everyone's time properly.
Hiring philosophy. What do you look for in candidates when building a production team?
I think it comes back to some of those traits in their ability and personality type, as I mentioned up front, like what makes a great producer. They're agnostic problem solvers, they're can-do people, and they just keep calm under pressure. I think that's naturally inherently a trait that Bullfrog employs across the board, not just one, be production-led skill sets. And I think ultimately that can-do attitude or that calmness and fusing those two worlds together is a critical personality trait. But I think, ultimately, I think it's more critical from a production perspective per se, because the ability to think outside the box to deliver solutions in very creative or different ways is a skill in itself. And why I push that for all team members to be thinking like that, and they truly do. I think the role of the producer and the production team specifically has to fuse the balance between profit, product, process, and people. And even within that, and those 4 key areas is a challenge, because not everyone has to consider all those areas at the one time, and I think even to conversations in past is like, you might have a creative team that builds an idea that maybe can't be afforded, but how can we do it down the track at a certain part of the process that actually then we can't deliver? I think the biggest part is making sure that when you do have that budget and expectation, or as I've outlined our process, we're catching those things early and having those people and those traits to be able to have those upfront, honest, transparent communications, but also think outside the box to deliver cost-efficient solutions or push the boundaries of what the creative product could be. That's the best thing you want. And I think we've only seen that work in spades for us.
Adding value. How do you define adding value in the context of a producer's role?
I think one thing I'm always super impressed in, and it comes a bit back to, thinking outside the box and delivering cost-efficient solutions. And let's just talk about cost. And yes, value can be derived closely. I think the value on the product, creativity, and all the rest of it, that's a given. I've sort of spoken to that. But sometimes when you sit back and you look at a breakdown in a job cost report or whatever it might be, or whatever we end up quoting out, and the product itself, there's nothing more fulfilling of seeing something that is both received by a client that is pushing their expectations, period, of what we can achieve and put as much on the screen or in the idea or the product that we actually create. And I even say that based on, making a suit that really only cost about $5,000 per se in materials in the end, but had outsized impact of value across what it delivered for the brand and business. But versus, a TVC that has the right level of investment in it because of the importance of based on the scale and where it's going to be seen and who's going to be seeing it and who's going to be engaging with it and the IP that goes with that. However, I think often the value add that I think producers are brilliant at doing, or should even implore even more, is just looking at the cost benefits of always, we say we should always be punching above our weight no matter what the budget. The budget is the budget. And we should be pushing every point that we can to make sure we get the best outcome from a product perspective. And so I think the value add is making the possible, or making, let's say sometimes, the impossible based on budget possible. And that is super critical to any creative process, let alone creative product.
How do you see the roles of account service and production intersecting? Do you think, are you seeing more of a blending of these roles in the context of today's budgets and agency structure, particularly in a Bullfrog?
I think naturally, like the intrinsic links of the role and the job to be done, especially when it comes to let's say financial governance and administration, they're both obviously intrinsically linked, but they're both very high touch relationship and networking type roles. So I think they are, I wouldn't say necessarily blended, because there's certain skill sets and certain ways of both delivering the job, but they're high relationship people and they're brilliant at still solving problems agnostically. I think to the points that I mentioned, while we do have a business management team per se, we don't necessarily operate as so or operate as departments. So even in that, I would say Bullfrog's more blended than most across the board, as of some of the process things I've outlined today. However, even to the point of, Chris, who I mentioned at the start, like he's pseudoed business management and production because he knows the value of what it can be at startup conversation as much as downstream as well. And clients super appreciate that. But it's not for everyone to do that either. And it's also not to say that those roles should coexist. And I don't necessarily believe in that. However, I do think the role of them being incredible networkers, planners, problem solvers, and relationship people can have value in both sides. And you are seeing a lot of, regardless of structures and beliefs of what be Bullfrog versus others, but you're seeing in industry those roles sort of getting smushed together because inherently they're super organised types and peoples that understand the value of the product, but also the connection to getting that delivery piece. But I also think there's this core traits that producers should own, and there's core traits of very organised, structured, governed people that are problem solving upstream, being business management. But that's not just isolated to any one of those departments. It's really the ability of the business to be able to bring people on that journey, be clients, partners, or internal team members. So, yeah, I think it's blended, but I think in our world it's more blended because of the way that we drive things through, period.
Mm-hmm. So, in your opinion, there'll always be a world that will require account service? Let's just wear those and producers.
I think without going down the rabbit hole, the role that technology is going to play in production moving forward, because that in itself is something that a lot of people are working through across the board. I think I have inherent problems with just even account service being called that, or business management too, as much as obviously believing in that and respecting those things. I think, realistically, I would call both those departments very great strategic problem solvers in general, that have a strong commercial acumen at the core of everything that they do, and a creative one at that too. So I think in Bullfrog, will there be those departments? I would say no as a fast answer forever. But at the core of, as I mentioned, the traits of those individuals, and why sometimes agencies or businesses blend those, is because there's inherent skill sets that do overlap, but there's also different value adds and different specific skill sets that will create certain outcomes that not everyone will have, nor every individual shares those either. So I know that's sort of a very stern answer, and probably people listening are like, hang on, where's my department going? But this is not something we've discussed that as much as we are always challenging the way that we move or problem solve. So I'd say in Bullfrog, we'd probably not just necessarily have those departments, because I think even account service and business management in itself in industry is changing and evolving, and it needs to always be more. And I think some of those, like I said, both of those departments, or let's say skill sets or roles, are fundamentally great strategic problem solvers. And so how do you upskill those and lean into the traits and inherent skills of the individual is a key thing about how do you expose those to the problems that they're right to solve.
So let's just touch on that rabbit hole just a little bit more. I think it's interesting for anybody who's listening. Where do you see, and let's just focus on production to start with. Where do you see the integration of technology with regards to production roles? Where do you see them enhancing? Where do you see them replacing?
Yeah, I think the role of technology in general regarding to people and ability is obviously a huge conversation right now, especially in the creative industry. And it's not just, I think the ability to do smarter, more efficient work is the way it needs to be looked at, but it also means that the people that you're hiring and how you scale as a structure in a business, you need to be also looking to ways that you can adopt technology at a faster pace than sometimes people are choosing to adopt. We've been doing a lot of work on how we look at that from a downstream production perspective, but also knowing the role of the thought and the organising idea is still critical to get delivered in certain ways. But as Bullfrog, we're very much work closely from a go-to-market strategy lead as much as a creative partner as well. And so when we look at every touch point of the business experience or our brand partners' experience, how do we make sure we're delivering value at every touch point? And sometimes there's smarter ways or cost benefits to using technology. And I say cost benefits, not sacrifice, that we just have to be adopting these new methodologies. There's efficiencies, there's time efficiencies, there's ways that technology can make things easier for us. We just have to be adopting those, not in the threat of taking jobs or headcount or eliminating headcount. And that's a serious thing, and that's happening globally as well. And that doesn't make it, I'm not saying it in a way of being insensitive to the fact that technology is eliminating, let's say, manual labour or people being able to do certain things. It's just how do we make sure we use it as a tool that is necessary to how we create great work, and look at the benefits of what that can add back to the business and plan for that accordingly. And I think that's the key part, is trying and planning now is going to set businesses up to be future-proof in as much as they reasonably can. Knowing that as a business that started on the doorstep of COVID, I would never have expected that to be a part of the reality of how Bullfrog grew. But even still, the role of technology is inherent in everything that we do. So I think we need to be adopting and trying to learn and upskill of how we use it to our best ability, but not in the context of what I am most proud of, as much as hearing a lot of incredible agency leaders talk about the role that AI and technology has within the companies, is you still need that brilliant brain or that personal touch to be able to deliver that. How we deliver that and how we enable that delivery and execution might have technology, might have people. So we need to be open-minded to what that looks like.
What about newcomers starting their careers in agency production teams? What advice would you give them to thrive in this fast-paced environment?
I think I'd say to any person looking to start in an industry or start in a new role, or progress into an industry from university or wherever they've come from, I would say for newcomers coming into the production remit specifically, and really any business, just be a sponge. Be a sponge paired with a can-do attitude. Be resourceful, think outside the box, but also have an authenticity and humility about how you go about it as well. I implore that at every level, myself definitely included, if not more, is admit fault, but don't not try because you're scared of failing. be okay to, learn fast, fail fast. And I think even in that is creating an environment of safety that people can do so, but also being open to doing so. And so that's a big thing we talk about across the team as we hire and onboard new people, but also from a leadership perspective is the expectation that every perspective is valuable. And I think for newcomers coming into the industry is put your perspective forward, because there's learned and lived experiences as much as there's people with brilliant experience in this team as there is in industry. Trust on that guidance, but be a sponge and also be okay to challenge and push things and come up with ideas. I think that's the number one thing I look for in every hire that we come through. Is I often like to hire people that have a little bit of a side hustle, because they're showing ability to look and think how they can create different things or different categories or fuel a hobby and a passion, because as someone that has built a career out of starting one thing as a hobby or a passion that ultimately led to things I would never widely imagine. I think if those people have those things, they're a great sign no matter what team you're in. But even as producers, naturally and inherently of all the things we've discussed today, they have a lot of things moving through their heads and what they want to deliver and what they want to push through, and thinking about how they deliver solutions on time, on budget, etc. It's often quite common that you look at those people and they've got many things always going, to the point that I said earlier, lots of plates spinning. But they're very great collaborators on bringing those plates, not dropping those plates, let's put it that way. So be a sponge, have the right attitude, be okay to do the hard work, but also make sure you've got the humility and authenticity for what you truly believe in.
What you've just said about side hustle, again, this other person who has their own independent agency, exactly the same. Love people with side hustles, because it shows them a broad skill set and allows them to know that they're applying themselves in other areas and working hard to improve themselves or follow a passion. And the crossover there, they just see the world maybe a bit differently, and then it helps with what they're doing work-wise. We're going to wrap this up very soon. Dalton, education within the space. Do you find that there's enough education out there for people within the industry, ad industry? Let's talk about production, but let's talk about in general. Do you think there's enough education or enough learnings that people are able to access that help them succeed better at their work?
Yeah, okay. I've got a lot of strong opinions on this one, but I'll keep them short and not too strong. But I think the industry can do better at banding together to give true value. There's a lot of incredible, brilliant, smart people in so many different businesses within this country. One big thing we do is actively seek business mentors from other world-class businesses to be able to support our talent, period, across all departments, be mentoring programs. And that in itself of showing the ability of craft and level in production, but also actually banding together to have shared learnings. Australia is a small place. It's a small industry. It's incredibly potent and punching above its weight creatively globally at the moment, and that's brilliant. But I think the one thing we can always get better at is sharing more and not being so worried about the patch of grass being seen hurt, because I think the biggest thing I believe in is fundamentally what drives success of teams and then individuals is authenticity for what they're chasing after. And it's hard to replicate that if you don't truly believe in what you're chasing after. So I think I'm always very open to share what Bullfrog is doing, because I know the authenticity of myself and this team is going to be unparalleled to those that will try to replicate it. And that's a very lucky position to be in, but I also just fundamentally believe in that as a person. It's very hard to manufacture something you don't wholeheartedly believe in. I stopped one business because I didn't believe in it as much anymore, or didn't want to be as passionate about that versus where I was going. And that might just be me as an individual, but the characteristics in our leadership team, as much as the broader team, is very similar. So I think we can do better to support the industry, especially in production and the evolution of production right now. I think there is some really great bodies and teams that are doing so, but I think there's also an opportunity for the industry to come together to help support that even more. And, we're really lucky, not lucky, very proud of, even recently, the MADC committee having 3 Bullfrog team members, a part of that journey of nurturing community talent and opportunity. And I think there's a lot of those bodies, be Award or Ad Council and others, that are doing great ways of facilitating opportunity. But I think sometimes the best opportunity right now for me is business-to-business shared learnings. And I reckon that is something that definitely should grow and be more prioritised across the board.
Do you think that's a cultural thing? And again, I don't want to get into the weeds of it too much, because I know that strong opinions seem to rub people up the certain way. is, I always find it and ask these questions, is it just a cultural that people are in Australia, we prefer not to share and we'd rather you figure it out on your own? Or does it take brave individuals to celebrate what we're doing and then change that whole narrative? Do you think it's possible?
I think it's definitely possible. I think openly I'd want Bullfrog to be known as championing everyone in the industry, period. I often talk about we don't look at our competitor set, we have to look at ourselves first and foremost, and the person staring back in the mirror is ultimately the hardest one to convince. And I believe that personally, but I know this team very much evokes that energy as well. And I think Australia does have its tall poppy syndrome, which is well documented and well seen across the board, but that's in all facets of people who are successful. I just think you can champion each other, and I think the industry is starting to do so, and especially we've seen it, especially with some of the initiatives we've done through Fair Advantage, which is our pro bono and pre-seed fund for female founders, and bucking the trend of openly what is a lack of funding to female founders with brilliant business ideas. But even to the point of, having a couple of founding team members of the aunties and industry bodies that are trying to push change. And while I talk about that specifically in gender diversity and focus, but I also would say, we just need to be championing each other more because it is a small place. And most employees, like we've got so many people that have worked with so many agencies with different stories. And really the realities are this industry is brilliant, but I think often it has. And one big thing we've openly talked about as a team is trying to look at the ways that you bring people back to the soul of it. Even though there's businesses to run, and my job is to make sure the runway is clear, the vision is set, the money doesn't run out, and all those things are a huge importance and priority of how you do business and how you create healthy, happy, good cultural teams and environments. However, knowing where everyone stands and what they're focusing on is just reframing the way that, hey, it's good to see people win. It's beautiful to see great creative work, even just within the last couple of weeks. The biggest thing for me is looking and championing the likes of Michael Walker's latest stop motion work of the 26 short films that he made for Telstra. And that is fucking marvelous. Beautiful to watch and well received. But I think often people are quick to poke holes in things. This industry is naturally trying to chase 1%, so it's inherently in everyone. But often the 1% we're looking at won't get seen by grandma on the couch. And sometimes you've got to remember who we're talking to and why we're doing it. And I think if you find that love and joy for who you're doing it for and appreciate the craft of what you're doing, I think, championing that is always a good thing. And so I'd rather this team always be known as don't envy, just support. And I think we've got a lot of work to delivering on that too. And sometimes that can be tough to do, but sometimes, I think it's necessary of how you champion an industry in the best possible way or get the best out of the industry and keep growing as a team as well. I think the production space is really interesting right now, and what the creative product ends up being and how you produce world-class work, I think has got a huge opportunity. And if anything, it could be quite confusing for so many right now, but there's also incredible opportunity within it. And I think it's just exciting to see a conversation be what you're doing is opening up different perspectives to how production and shared learnings, to the point of, as we just discussed around how do you have resources and learnings. I think this is a brilliant way to do so. So, congrats and kudos on that. But also, it's been fascinating to see some different perspectives of the likes of past guests like Nat Taylor, who I know very well. Equally seeing those perspectives on not only leadership, but the role that production plays in certain facets and the way that it plays be, a puppet or, an agency founder talking about the role that production means to that team and the delivery of great work. So thank you for your time, and I just appreciate the conversation.
Dalton, appreciate your kind words. Thank you so much for giving up your time, jumping on, talking to us, being open. I'm sure there's great insight that people will get from it, from the chat today. So thank you so much. Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.